I want to get out of the way so you can begin the panel. It's a very distinguished panel with a pretty good moderator who happens to be my daughter, but is qualified for this because of her work at an American institution of higher education and her experience with higher education at home and abroad, and her understanding of the economics of the challenge. So I would like to turn the program over to our moderator. Chelsea, come on.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panelists. Executive Director, Get Schooled Foundation, Marie Groark. Assistant Secretary for Post-Secondary Education, U.S. Department of Education, Dr. Eduardo M. Ochoa. President, Miami-Dade College, Dr. Eduardo Padron. Medical student, Virginia Commonwealth University, Regional Coordinator, American Medical Student Association, Ifreke B. Williams.
Thank you. I'd like to particularly thank Ifreke for being here, given that VCU's Final Four game starts while we're still going to be in this panel. And I'd like to thank all of our panelists for being here to discuss college affordability, not only in this country, but also around the world. The Chronicle of Higher Education every year publishes a survey of freshmen who have recently started community college, vocational school. And for those who started in 2010, like for the last decade, more than 2/3 were worried about how they would pay for their education. The vast majority also cited, after whether or not graduates get a good job, the cost of their institution as a deciding factor as to where they chose to enroll. Now, since I graduated from college a decade ago, I feel quite old looking out in the audience. As my father said earlier, the average tuition cost for community colleges and four-year institutions has risen by 75%. Clearly, this is an unsustainable trajectory for students, for families, and for our institutions. And I'd like to hear from the audience at some point about what you're thinking the solutions are to this challenge, what maybe you've been inspired by from the commitments we just heard announced, and the winner of the Get Schooled MTV's competition. But I'd like to start from a couple of perspectives listening to our panelists. One, what can colleges do to make themselves more affordable, to control their tuition costs, or to better enable students like Ifreke to enroll? And also, what is the role of government and community organizations to ensure that we are asking the right questions as students and families, and are doing everything we can to take advantage of the government programs that do exist? So to start, I'd like to ask Eduardo, from your experience at Miami-Dade, what lessons do you think are applicable to not only other community colleges, but four-year institutions on how to make it more affordable from an institutional perspective?
Well, as we all know, keeping college affordable is most important in this century. The 21st century knowledge economy requires people to have post-secondary knowledge, education, and training. So I think it's our duty as colleges and universities to try every possible way to make college affordable. We do what most other colleges do. You streamline the bureaucracy, you put cost containment measures in place, you consolidate programs. For example, at Miami-Dade College, we used to have a department of mortuary science and a department of biology. Now it's only one department. You save money that way. And we do a myriad of things that we don't have time here to enumerate. But the fact of the matter is that most of these measures only scratch the surface. The main problem that public institutions are facing in America today is that funding for public institutions in the States is being decimated. So when your income for the institutions to do the job comes from the state or student tuition, and what you get from the state continues to decrease, you have no other option than to increase tuition. And that's not sustainable, because what's happening is you are impacting the kids who need the help the most. Kids from families with the means have a lot of options. But the kids that we need the most in college, the kids are going to be the majority of the workforce 10, 20, 50 years from now, are the ones who do not have the means to afford a college education. So I think it's essential that we worry about those students and to make sure that we maintain college affordable. Part of the problem is a deficit of understanding, both at the family level and the policy-making level. At the family level, many families see college as an impossibility. They don't know how to access college, how to access financial aid. And I think our institutions, NGOs, media, churches, we all have a role in educating community. I always say that we do a good job in educating students, but we higher ed institutions have failed miserably in educating community. So that's one thing. But the biggest deficit of understanding is at the federal level, is the fact that, and at the state level, policymakers, because frankly, we need to understand that this is a national imperative, is a matter of national security, and actually is the civil rights issue of our time. We need to make sure that education is prioritized in this nation, and that is not being done to the degree that we deserve and we need.
So while we're waiting for Dawn's tool to come into reality, what, Eduardo, could the government be doing a better job of ensuring that students and their families know what programs they are eligible for, to ensure that even amidst the budget fights in Washington, people know that the maximum Pell Grant of $5,500 per year has been protected, to know that the HOPE tax credits are still there for families to take advantage of. What can the government be doing to get its message out more effectively?
Well, I think our Federal Student Aid Office, the FSA office that is responsible for dispersing all that financial aid, is looking to do more outreach and devote more resources to that. But frankly, right now, our biggest concern is, in fact, safeguarding that Pell Grant that you spoke about, which is in danger. Currently, we are facing a $20 billion shortfall in Pell funding. And the president in his 2012 budget, proposed budget, has shown a way to safeguard Pell Grant and ensure that the maximum Pell Grant continues. So that's something that is very important, and we hope that Congress will see the wisdom of that and it will stick. So that's something to watch for, and and to make your views known about.
I think I just made my views known, but I'm happy to continue talking about it. And Marie, with your work with high school students and high schools and families who have students in high school, what are you doing to ensure that they really know what questions they should be asking, of the office that Eduardo runs, of institutions like Eduardo's that their students may be applying for?
Yeah, so the Get Schooled Foundation is a organization that was founded by Viacom, which includes the MTV network of families, so everyone from Nickelodeon up through MTV and VH1, along with BET and Paramount Pictures. And when we think about the role of media, to answer the question you say and what the challenges are, one thing we know is, as Eduardo Padron said, is this huge cost of college, especially for the low-income students or those that are least prepared for college. And one thing we know is that about half of college students in a state like California actually have to take remedial classes when they go to college, which means they're almost paying twice what they should have to pay for college. So the first thing we know is that we have to better educate high school students to really understand what they need to accomplish in high school to reduce costs in college. Now, there are probably many of you who had some idea of that and you started taking AP classes in college. So you're way ahead of the game. Most students, especially most low-income students, are actually way behind the game. So what can we do to educate and engage students so they're aware of that information? The second thing to think about is, as we talk about protecting the Pell Grant, is how many students actually don't know that they're eligible for the Pell Grant. and or go to FAFSA.gov or ed.gov to fill it out, and they are so mystified by it, they immediately close it, and their eyes roll to the back of the head, and they think, I can't do this. We know from our partners at the College Board that there are literally millions and millions of dollars that are left on the table, low-income students who could have accessed that money that Eduardo, to the right of me, fought so hard to get, but actually don't get. And so how do we use tools like the one at Devon's that was announced today and others to help make even the aid that we have now more accessible to those students that are least likely to access it, and as a country is most important that we help them access it.
And so I did, great, clap for that. Yeah, I did warn Eduardo I was going to ask this question. There are now 106 questions on the FAFSA form, and it grows longer by the year. And although the administration has done something which had never been possible previously, to enable families to reconcile their tax information with the FAFSA form, it still is a significant burden on families and students. What do you see happening in the next couple of years to make the process of applying for federal aid easier from an administrative standpoint?
Well, I think that's something that my boss, Martha Cantor, is also very interested in pursuing. And we're actually looking at the possibility of not having a FAFSA at all, but actually proactively informing households that they qualify for financial aid and for Pell Grants.
We'll help you in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all signed up. Ifreke, what have you heard, not only in the panel, but from the commitments that were discussed, that you think could really make a difference for you as a current student facing tremendous debt when you graduate from medical school, and that you could see yourself helping other students to navigate the system in the future?
Yeah, some of the things I've heard about is that a lot of students going to college today are very unaware of all the financing options that are available to them. Like they were saying earlier, there are millions and millions of dollars that every year go unclaimed in federal student scholarships and grants. And there are also other programs like loan repayment options, loan forgiveness programs, and public service loan forgiveness programs that enable students who go into different career paths to utilize to pay back their debt. So I think one of the biggest thing that could help students today is making sure that students are aware of all the different financing options that are available to them. That could be done by the financial aid offices could work closer with students, when they're admitted, to make sure that they know what financing options are available. They can look at their career path and look ahead and figure out what's my income earning potential down the line. How much, depending on what I'm studying, how much am I going to end up making? And when you look at that, then you figure out, okay, what options are available. For instance, if I want to pursue a career in public health, people don't know that there's a public service loan forgiveness that allows you to make payments every year, just a certain percentage of your income, and if you make those payments for just 10 years, the rest of your loans are forgiven, as long as you work in a public service setting. So public service includes public health, being a teacher, and different other career paths. So I think just educating students, making sure the students are aware of, aware of the financing options, what career paths they're going into, and what's available for their career paths, I think would really be helpful.
And another thing that I think would be helpful directly for you and for students who are already in post-secondary education currently is something that we were talking about earlier, Eduardo, that the government is considering to enable a direct repayment loan program, not only for prospective students, but also for students who are currently enrolled. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes, the current 2012 proposed budget includes a conversion of outstanding FFEL loans to direct loans, which would actually be something that would be a win-win both for students and for the government.
And how many students potentially would that impact? Do you have any sense?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but it would be substantial.
And Eduardo, at Miami-Dade, one of the things that we were talking about earlier as well that really struck me was what you're moving toward to enable all students in the Miami-Dade school district who reach a certain average to be able to enroll in programs tuition-free. I think that is also sort of the type of radical idea that we need to structurally change the system.
Well, because of the community that we serve, we thought it was very important to develop a partnership with the business sector in Miami, with NGOs, with all kind of stakeholders into the education arena, to develop a scholarship fund to guarantee, and we announced this a couple of weeks ago, beginning this year, every high school graduate in Miami, and this is the 4th largest system in the nation, who graduates with a B and is college ready, will be guaranteed 2 years of free college. So tuition free. Now, this is of course an effort that needs to be sustained, but you asked the question before, what are some of the answers? Because cost is a very important variable in all of this. And there are 3 things that I would suggest. Number one, even 15 years ago, I participated with the Woodrow Wilson Commission looking at the last year of high school, and the conclusion was that it was a waste year. So one of the things that I am proposing is that we eliminate the 12th grade from high school, and we use that year, the students that are well prepared, to take that year to take college courses, so when they get to college, they have at least 1 year of college. And we can work with colleges and universities to do that, and they can do that in the same high school. For those students who are not prepared and need remedial programs when they come to college, we spend that year giving them intensive developmental courses so they are ready to start college classes when they actually go to the college. That's one thing. The second thing, which is not very popular now because it costs money and we are not in a position probably to do it, but it's long term. If we really believe that we need every American to have the opportunity for post-secondary education, we need to have an equivalent of a Title I for higher ed. Because the problem that we have in America today is that the same people...
Does everyone know what Title I is? No, maybe you could explain what Title I is,
Well, in
Eduardo.
simple words, Title I, it's a program that for schools that are serving mostly low-income students, disadvantaged students, those schools get differential funding and get significant support from the federal government. For example, all those students get a free lunch, which I think is very important. It's one of the many things that those schools get. So we need the same thing for higher ed. So those schools that are serving minority students, that are serving disadvantaged communities, will have the extra funding to be able to support their education. And finally, I really feel that we need to do a better job working with communities, the communities where we are, that we're serving, so families are better informed of what college is all about, the imperative of sending their children to college, and making sure they know the different ways to finance their education. So those are 3 things that I think are fundamental.
Marie, what are your reactions to, particularly Eduardo's first suggestion to abrogate the 12th grade? Given what you were saying about how many students, even having gone through the 12th grade, stand unprepared for college and have to take remedial courses, how would you react to that suggestion?
I actually think if executed well, it's a very interesting and promising idea. I think there's a program out there, it's called Early College High Schools, and they probably started about 10 years ago. And in essence, it blends college and high school. And I think most students, within 4 or 5 years of when they begin high school, will graduate with 2 years of college credit under their belt. And you might say, oh, I bet that's for the most academically gifted students. Well, in fact, they piloted it in schools where there were some of the lowest performing students. But what they found was because those students had high expectations of them and were given given the support, I think as Eduardo mentioned, the results have been fantastic. So I think that if executed well, it actually could help to address some of the issues that we talked about. I just want to throw one other thing out there, though, as we talk about these issues and some of the ideas we've heard. These are big, bold ideas. But there are challenges that you as students are facing today that I wonder whether or not colleges and institutions can do a better job of at least recognizing some of the things that you're balancing. For example, we know that 75% of college students are trying to work and go to school at the same time. And yet, most colleges are not organizing their schedules in a way that account for the fact that you're trying to work with your employer to work with that schedule and work with the colleges and try to figure out how you can fit your classes in. And what happens is that students, it takes 5, 6, 7 years to finish school simply because they can't get the classes that they need to finish college because they don't work with the work schedule. There are schools like CUNY, the City University of New York City, who's starting a brand new college specifically for working students to think about how they can reorganize themselves. So there are small pilot programs like that out there, but I wonder what we can push colleges to do to recognize that, hey, most of you are not just kind of sitting in your dorm room at 2 o'clock in the afternoon doing nothing, but that you have a lot of things that you're balancing, and how can schools better work with you?
And Eduardo, if there are, more flexible, not only sort of work-study programs developing, but also potentially even kind of what it means to have gone to high school or gone to college, do you think that the federal government's loan programs could support that type of flexibility and more self-directed education than the four-year model that the loan program is currently structured around?
I should think so. I don't see why not. Yeah. I don't see any problem with that. Yeah.
You can applaud for that too. One of the most often discussed sort of disruptive innovations in higher education is the advent of online universities and online classes. So we have examples from the Western Governors Association and the University of Phoenix that are entirely online, to now MIT putting many of its classes online, free and open to non-MIT students. Which of sort of these online innovations do you think are the most promising, and which do you worry the most about? And maybe Eduardo, we could start with you.
Well, I think they're very promising, and the way that I see this is that you need to provide students today with options. And not all options are good for everybody, and that's what we need to understand. At Miami-Dade College, you can get an entire degree online. However, for many students, that's not an option they prefer. You need to be very disciplined, you need to have a structure in order to really be successful in those courses. Many students take online courses and also face-to-face instruction. They blend the two, and I think that's wonderful. But the important thing is to give students, that option and use technology to enable learning in a way that has never been done before. I think all these things are very, very important. The thing that we need to recognize is for the kind of students that we're trying to reach, to bring to the institution, that are the students that are, in most cases, first-generation college students who come from low-income backgrounds, that have to work and go to school. They don't have the luxury of being full-time students. It's very important we realize that many of these students are not yet independent learners, and they need to be if they're going to be successful in this type of courses. But you need to introduce them to the new technology, you need to introduce them to new learning styles, and you have to create a very supportive atmosphere. We were talking about those students who work and have difficulty finding the classes. Well, the old model is that you offer the classes when the faculty want to teach. And we need to offer the classes when the student needs the classes and not when the teachers want to teach. That's very, very important.
And are you doing that at Miami-Dade?
We definitely do that. We are open, we offer classes Saturdays and Sunday evening, weekend courses, early in the morning, 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, because students have different needs. And I think it's our duty to offer them the classes when they need them the most. And I think if we all do that, we're really going to facilitate learning.
And Marie, I see you nodding. Do you want to comment on what Eduardo just said, or also kind of add some of the exciting online innovations that you've seen from the Get School platform?
Well, my thought, and you know, there are others who are probably more expert than I am on the state of online learning, but my general thought about it is that, and maybe for those of you who have taken an online course, you've experienced this, is that there's a lot of room to improve the quality of online courses. There's a lot of R&D that could be done to help improve both how interesting they are, how much you learn, the efficacy of those courses. And one thing I always wonder is why does each university system, they're investing in this R&D independently, essentially. And I'd be curious to know, is there a role for the federal government to help ensure sort of a broad R&D around online learning? So 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we'll be in a much different place in terms of what we think about sort of the next generation of online learning. We think about how quickly Apple can put out a new iPad. It would be great if we saw the quality of online learning advancing at the same pace.
Well, I think that's very much in point. And in fact, again, referring to the President's 2012 budget proposal, there is a program called First in the World that would be run under the Fund for the Improvement of Post-Secondary Education that is going to be specifically targeted at innovations that rely on new technologies and new pedagogies to improve both quality and efficiency. So because one of the biggest challenges we have, as Eduardo mentioned earlier, is that the cutbacks on state funding to higher education really have made it much more difficult to reach the President's transformational 2020 goal for education without some dramatic improvement in productivity. And this new technology holds great promise. And I think it's going to happen. I think that if you look at other industries and other product lines where a totally new technical concept comes in, at first it's inferior, but eventually it starts to improve and overtakes the older models.
Ifreke, have you taken any online classes?
Yes, in my medical school, literally all our medical classes are available online. So we actually had classmates that we don't see on a daily basis because they take all their classes online. I think, like you were saying, that works for that works for certain students who are very motivated, who will make the time and be disciplined to sit down at home, you know, and ignore every other distractions available at home to watch these lectures online. I've done it myself, and I only did it on days when I couldn't go to class because I tend to prefer a classroom setting. But I know many students who just watch lectures at home, and we only see them on exam days. And you know, I think that's that's definitely a viable option for a lot of students, especially if it helps to cut down the cost of tuition.
Does it cut down the cost of your tuition?
Nope. It's just an available option.
It's an available
students.
option.
Yeah.
Eduardo, do you have different tuition levels at Miami-Dade for online versus in-classroom?
No, basically the tuition is the same. And there is a myth that online instruction is less expensive. I can tell you at my institution it's not. The only reason
why is that?
Because the support systems that we provide for the students, we just don't offer an online course. We offer a help desk for the students 24 hours a day. We do tutoring and mentoring online for the students who need it. We provide all kinds of support services for the students, and that costs money. So the thing that we save a little bit, it's in the facilities, but the facilities we already have, so you don't really save much. What is important to know is that online education is not about reducing cost, at least not now in 2011. It's about giving students options and helping them achieve their goals in a different methodology, different style. My hope is, and Eduardo's too, and I know all of us share the same, is that we're going to find ways in which online education could become less costly. So for the students, it will be an advantage if they do that. But right now, at my institution, we're not able to have any savings as a result of that. We don't put 300 students enrolling in one course, We keep those the enrollment in the online programs small, precisely because we want those courses to be community of learners, learning from each other, working with the faculty member, and that's the only way that you can really ensure that the students are having a good learning experience.
Yeah, we have a slightly different perspective, although we agree in the ultimate goal. I think that so far, traditional higher ed institutions have used distance learning to make the same sort of learning methods available at a distance, but haven't really used the technology to transform how teaching and learning takes place. There are other developments underway which would actually tap the incredible computing power that we have available now to actually save on faculty labor time, and that's where the real cost savings would come in.
And are there any examples of online remedial programs, Marie, that you think are worth highlighting or talking about that are providing that better bridge from high school to post-secondary education?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because those are exactly the students that Eduardo was mentioning that are often those that have the hardest time with a sole online learning course. There's a lot of research going on at Carnegie Mellon, and here I want to say in the San Jose area, maybe Foothills University, there are programs in development to try to address this issue so that we might be able to close the preparation gap in a little more efficient way. But again, there's a lot more that needs to be done in those areas.
Great. I think we're going to take a few questions from our audience here with us and also online. From Fernando, submitted via text for Dr. Padron. What can we students do to help create a culture where low-income high schoolers see college as a tangible possibility? I know you do a lot of work in the community around Miami-Dade College. What are you doing that maybe Fernando could do in his community?
Well, I believe that colleges and universities have an obligation to work with the high schools in their area to do several things. Number one, students in the 9th or 10th grade at the latest need to have a good understanding of the real preparation they need to have to be successful in college. One of the saddest things that I witness every year is students who have a high school diploma come to the college, go through the advisement process, do the testing to see where they are, not testing to keep them out, but testing to be able to see if they're prepared to take the courses. And they sit with an advisor and they want to be engineers, and the advisor says, well, you have to take remedial math, remedial English, remedial reading. And, for the student, it's a shock because, I have my high school diploma. What do you mean I'm going to take remedial courses? I want to take the engineering courses. Well, you can't, because if you cannot read, if you cannot have good mathematical skills, you're going to fail in your engineering courses. And I have seen students right there drop out. I see students and parents crying. I have seen all kinds of situations which are very, very sad. And that's because the students go through high school without a realistic view and understanding of what they need, the preparation they need to be successful in college. That's one. The second thing is we need to test those students at that age, at that point, 10th grade at the latest, so if in fact they have deficiencies, they can overcome them before they get to college. So that's another one. The other one is for students to have a plan, to be able to develop a plan for college, especially the financing of the college education, to know whether they're eligible for Pell, to know how they access direct loans, how do they access all the financial opportunities necessary for them to be able to make college affordable for them. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and I would recommend to Fernando that he encourages the principal of the school and the universities in the area to do that, because I think if we would do that, it will be so much better for students, and many more students will be successful.
For Marie, submitted also via text, have you benefited from public-private partnerships in increasing school attendance and graduation rates? And I think this in many ways builds on Eduardo's answer to Fernando, that it is a a collective effort from the post-secondary institutions in a community to the secondary schools to the parents as well as the students. And so what public-private partnerships have you seen that have really worked?
So Get Schooled is a benefit of well, not quite a public, but a company trying to think about how they can most strategically use their assets to advance this goal. And one of the things that I've recognized is that there are many, many companies in this country who understand the importance of education, who understand that our future is tied to the education of this next generation, but are almost stymied about how best to go about it. And so what you see is many corporations who fund small programs, who are just sort of do sort of a kind of a nice to have to show that they're at least committed a little bit, but aren't really sure about how they can do their work in a way that actually is strategic enough that it moves the needle, that we actually see a dramatic increase in graduation rates. And so one of the things that we work with at Get Schooled is to work with companies to say, look, here are some milestones that matter the most. Gosh, you know, we need to make sure that young people are going to school. In New York City, for example, a third of high school students in New York City don't show up on any given day. We need to make sure those young people are going to school, that they're taking the classes that they need, and they're graduating college ready. So companies, if you're interested in getting involved, let's work together to think about how we can move students along that continuum in a way that actually will help us see America progress. So I think there's some great small examples, but there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of how we go about it at scale.
Ifreke, what really helped you when you were sort of at the critical 9th grade level that Eduardo was talking about, to think about how high school really was your stepping stone to college and to medical school?
I've always, I mean, my family and the community that I grew up in, we've always valued education. You know, I was raised to know that you have to go to college in order to, you know, be able to make a good living and you know, and advance yourself in a society. So I definitely did my research. I figured out what my passions were, figuring out, you know, what career path I wanted to pursue, and ultimately, for me, I just had to look into what financing options were going to be available for me. There are scholarships, you know, available for people who go to medical school. You know, there are scholarships for people who pursue different other career paths. So I think just being aware of all the financing options that are available, knowing, you know, valuing education, knowing that it's very important for the future, it's important to put across to high school students, you know, maybe even finding mentors to help them navigate the system, talk to them on a frequent basis, not just giving them a one-time advice, but just being with them through the whole process of applying to college. I'm sorry, I keep going back and forth to medical school and college, but for college, I think just having a mentor to guide you through the process, applying to colleges, navigating the financial aid process, I think it is very valuable for students.
Eduardo, does Miami-Dade have a mentorship program like that? Do current Miami-Dade students mentor prospective students in their community?
Well, what we do is we ask the students, the freshman students who come to college, to serve as mentors and ambassadors to the high schools where they came from, to go back and talk to the students who are in the graduating class that year, to understand the struggles and the challenges of being in college, in addition to advisors that are permanently going to, you know, to the college. We have a real deficit of understanding. Your dad, President Clinton, mentioned in the introduction that well over 60% of all the new jobs that are being created in the 21st century knowledge economy, that means now, require college education. I said it before, the high school diploma is the credential for most of the 20th century, when you could graduate with a high school diploma or less, go into the workforce, get a good salary, buy a home, buy cars, put your children through school, and be part of the middle class. Today, with a high school diploma, you don't get anywhere. So for people, students, and families to understand that is key. And unfortunately, not many people today in our communities understand that. So it's our duty to make sure that understanding is there, because that's the only way they're going to prepare. The scholarship that we just created has a great effect, because it's not only the money. But families are saying, oh, no, 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 you are not just going to get the high school diploma. You have to get at least a B, because the only way we're going to afford you going to college is by getting a B. So the students are getting the pressure from the families that they know they have to get a B and be college ready in order to get that scholarship. And that's having a significant impact. And that's part of the informational process that I think members of the community have an obligation to do. Not just the colleges and universities, but all the community organizations, church, all the stakeholders have to understand that this is a national imperative and we must all work together to make it happen.
Thank you. For Mr. Ochoa, this is taking us to the other end of the educational spectrum, a question submitted via text. What specifically, and presumably by the government, can be done at the primary school level to improve socioeconomic and racial diversity in higher education?
Well, I think that it's not so much the government, but what people can do at the local level to help this. And again, following up on Eduardo's point, it's all about creating that expectation that college is the thing to do. And one way to do it, one specific sort of concrete suggestion for primary school level would be to develop relationships with local university and to have students go over there periodically to visit the campus, to have sessions with faculty or counselors and begin to visualize what it will be like to be going to college. We did that with a local high school in Sonoma County, and all of those students went on to college after they graduated.
Can I just add, though, I think that's something all of us can do. At the Get Schooled Foundation, one of the things we do is we work with very popular talent to help them get out and give that message. And so, for example, we brought Ludacris to quite a few high schools with that message that, that the music business is 90% business and 10% music. And I tell you what, Ludacris saying that is a ton more effective than me saying it, you know, Chelsea, or either of the Eduardos. And so when we think about, you know, who is the right messenger to deliver that message? Who is going to make a difference to the audience? And be realistic about that. And then understand that all of us have a role to play and really get out and engage young people with those messages in all different kinds of ways. Because none of us alone can solve the problem. It's all of us working together, using the various megaphones we have to get that message across.
And
I agree with that. You know, we all have to create a culture of possibility. So people, regardless of their stake in life, understand that it's possible to go to college and it's possible to graduate from college. We at Miami-Dade College, we have the largest number of graduates, Hispanics and African Americans, of any college or university in the nation. And that's because for many, many years, we have worked very, very hard. Thank you. We have worked very hard to let those communities know that they have, you know, to give them a sense of belonging, a sense of participation. We're not an ivory tower. We're very much part of the community. And I think there is a sense of comfort in people knowing that that institution belongs to them. And we're very proud to be able to see the results in the graduating classes. And it takes effort, like everything else in life. But creating a culture of possibility in the communities where we labor is extremely important.
And I think one of the things that has been clear to me listening to the panel is that to create that culture of possibilities, we have to have real optionality, so that it is apparent there are many paths through a post-secondary education for students and their families. For Marie, what is college readiness? This was submitted via Twitter. We had to have some question via Twitter. The others had all been via text. And what can K-12 educators do to prepare their students for college to hopefully erase the need for the remedial classes that you and Eduardo have talked about?
Yeah, so I can give an answer, but we have other experts here on the stage. I mean, college readiness is a term that I started going around 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, and nobody can necessarily define it. I think the most simple definition, though, is that you can enter Miami-Dade Community College and not have to take a remedial course. And one of the things that I know from my work is that oftentimes the high schools and the colleges don't even speak to each other. And so we had an example, I think, in North Carolina, where a high school was really excited because they thought thought they'd gotten all their students college ready, and they'd given a test and they all passed. And then those students went across the street to the community college and took the placement test, which was different than the test the high schools took, and they had like a 50% remedial rate. And so it just is so jarring. And so one of the things we can do is help colleges and high schools work better together so the high school educators are aware of what the colleges expect. And as Eduardo said, start testing them in the 10th grade. Don't let that placement test be the first time they ever see that test. It's not a secret. Let kids practice taking that test so that they don't go into remedial classes simply because they didn't know how to take the test or because they missed the answer by 5 or 6 points. These aren't high stakes tests, they're placement tests, and we should do all we can to make sure that the young people are ready for them and can pass them.
We have one of the national leaders in doing this right here in California. The California State University includes a number of questions in the junior high school tests that are taken statewide, and that provides an early warning to students if they're going to need remediation where they're at, so they can anticipate that and work during their senior year. But in order to follow that up, there has to be continuous dialogue between the high school teachers and the faculty in the colleges.
Great, thank you. I'd like to give the last word to the only current student on the panel. Ifreke, what have we talked about that you think would really make a difference to not only you and your peers, but to students who might be listening online as they think about not only going to college, but also going to medical school?
I think one of the biggest things that can be one of the biggest things that can be most beneficial to students is making college and graduate education more affordable. And we've talked about a number of options today, but from a government level, increasing the amount of scholarships that are available for students, and institutional level, maybe looking at ways to lower costs of tuition, and also providing financial literacy to students, from the minute that they get into college or get into medical school. Especially for college students who are just coming out of high school, they're just overwhelmed by all the information that's out there. What do I apply for? What am I eligible for? Just having someone to guide them through the process is very important, and not just looking at what financial options are available, but actually sitting with them and looking at their career path. Okay, what do you want to study? Okay, if you want to major in history, okay, what is your earning potential down the line? Because these are going to really determine, which school do you go to, how much debt you should go into. You don't want to graduate with $150,000 in debt if your salary is going to be $40,000 and you're not going to be able to pay back this debt. So it's really important to work with students more closely and help them through the financial aid process. And students themselves, they need to think about these things, think about, students should follow their passions, but they definitely need to think about ways to ensure that they don't burden themselves with huge debt. Making a decision of which school to go to is very important. Do I go to an Ivy League school that, the cost is $50,000 per year if I'm not going to have scholarships, if I come from a low-income background, versus going to a community college or working while in college. Just looking at having a plan that it's going to benefit you in the long term is very important. So, on the whole, I think making sure that students have information on all the different financing options available, and increasing scholarships, increasing funding for loan forgiveness programs, loan repayment programs. These are available for people going to medical school, for people who are doing primary care, for instance. There are scholarships to enable more students going to primary care, because we need more primary care physicians, and people going to public health as well. We have the public service loan forgiveness that's all geared towards helping students realize their dreams but decrease their debt burden.
Well, I think all of us need to do a better job to ensure that everyone can be as articulate as Ifreke is, and you are more than trying, you are succeeding, and have not only the option and the culture of options that Eduardo talked about, but are able to live your dreams. And I know that Eduardo and Marie and all of us are on board to try to do that. So thank you all for listening, and I'd like to thank our panelists.